Graham, how are you doing?
Good.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
I like your necklace. That's beautiful.
Thank you. This is my first time wearing it, just for you.
Thank you so much. It's nice
Uh,
to meet
you too. I like that background where
you.
you
Oh,
are.
yeah, it's the side of the house. We live on a mountain. It's very pretty.
Are you in Arizona now?
I'm in Arizona, yeah. Do you know Arizona at all? You know Phoenix at
I've
all?
only been one time.
Okay. Well, we live in the city of Phoenix, and there's a mountain called Camelback Mountain. It's kind of the symbol of Phoenix. But anyway, we live on the mountain. There's lots of wildlife, and it's really cool. So
And hot.
yes, it is hot. It is. Yeah. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? I'm sorry.
Well, from originally Chicago.
Oh, okay. I know Chicago real well. Yeah.
Yeah, originally Chicago. My parents separated, got back together. So when they separated, we moved to Atlanta, which is where my mother is from, and her support system. And then when they decided to get back together, my dad had moved to Los Angeles. So I'm in LA.
Oh, and how old do you? Because I spent time in Chicago as a little boy.
I know. I read your book.
Oh, thank you. And then actually, I worked in Chicago as an advisor to the Illinois foster care system, so I know it real well. And then, of course, grew up in LA. What part of LA did you grow up in?
LA? So, yeah, we came in around the 80s, like 82. So first North Hollywood.
Okay, there
another
you go.
stomping ground in York.
The Hollywood very well.
So first North Hollywood, and then LA, which then became known as South Central LA.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but when I went to college, I went back to Atlanta for undergrad.
Oh, okay.
And then came here and got my MBA at Dominguez Hills.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Long time ago, but yeah. Yeah, but I wanted to reach out to you. Well, actually, you kept coming back around in my research. You being an expert in this field. I love all things documentary and memoir. And my podcast typically is talking about being a single woman over 30 and all of the issues and shame and things around being of a certain age and not having any kids and not being married, and all the things that come with that. And basically how to live your life now and not have to worry about if you're married, if you're not, just be you, do you. And so just to tie that in to why I reached out to you, I'm thinking about single moms who may have had children in the foster care system, children be removed from their care for whatever reasons. And I watched the documentary, Lawrence Phillips.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Running for his life. And you were on it.
Yes, I was. Yeah. Very sad story.
Right. Who's now deceased.
Yeah.
And he spent time at McLaren Hall. You spent time at McLaren Hall. It seemed like McLaren Hall kept coming up in all these different memoirs and documentaries, especially if you were a child in Los Angeles County.
Yes.
Tiffany Haddish, someone else who was at McLaren Hall at one point in time. So I, just being the inquisitive person I am and wanted to understand things, and I guess it shocked me to know that so many children not only were in the foster care system, but were specifically at McLaren Hall at some point in time between 1960 and 2003 when it was shut down.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you what you thought the climate was around that time. Why do you think all of these children were in placement in a foster care, juvenile hall, whatever the case may be, and McLaren Hall became this dumping ground for children who some had psychiatric issues, behavioral problems. Some were just kids who may have lost a parent to death. What was going on that thousands upon thousands of kids wound up there?
You know, I think in my mind, what it was about is something that unfortunately still exists. And you brought it up in just introducing yourself right now. A lot of it has to do with the way a society looks at women, looks at single women with children, particularly looks at women either of color or women without means who've had children, and their struggle, their intolerance for those women and those families, and the basic lack of concern, constructive concern that they have for their kids and for keeping their kids with them. So it's, you know, with my mom was a 24-year-old single woman, had a serious mental disorder, had paranoid schizophrenia, and they took her child from her, and that was the end of that. I've seen hundreds of kids who have gone through McLaren, who go through the foster care system generally, and it has nothing to do with abuse. It is overwhelmingly a product of what is called neglect, and that's just a code word in many ways for poverty, for a lack of resources, and not for a lack of love, not for a lack of caring, but for struggle. And it's inexcusable.
And so looking back at 1960,
yeah,
what happened? I don't know if I read this correctly, or if I was understanding it correctly when I was researching, but it seemed to be that during that time, there were a lot of families moving west.
Sure.
And with those families, of course, came their children, and they moved west in search of, I guess, a better life, escaping what specifically, I'm not sure.
Sure.
And then all of these children were kind of just in the streets. Their families could not afford to care for them. There was a lot of truancy, and then that started the issue of having displaced or children removed. But there was no Department of Children and Family Services as we knew it to be, which came about in the 80s.
That's absolutely right. So McLaren was actually the very beginning of that effort to separate kids out, separate kids who were in the juvenile justice system. They didn't call it that back then, but the juvenile justice system and the foster care system. So originally what the situation was is all children, whether they were accused of a crime or whether they had been taken from their parents, were placed in one place, and that was Central Juvenile Hall in Los Angeles. And McLaren was actually purchased by the County of Los Angeles because it had a lot of beds and it was cheap. You go back and you look at newspaper articles, and that's exactly what they said. We can't find a place with beds that are this cheap. And it was cheap because it was a dilapidated facility. It had been originally a home for young girls who had venereal diseases and were pregnant, principally gonorrhea. And it was to prevent, which produces blindness when a child is born. So it was originally founded to be that. It then became a polio hospital, and then it was sitting abandoned and was purchased. And so it had ultimately very little to do with the welfare of kids, because it was cheap. And then ultimately the goal of going ahead and saying, we're going to separate foster children out from kids who are in the dependency system or in the delinquency system, that never worked. The McLaren Hall continued to be operated by the Department of Probation. They wrapped it in a 14-foot fence with barbed wire and floodlights that came on at night. It was patrolled in the halls by probation officers. It looked, it acted, it felt, it was very much a hardline delinquency child prison. That attitude. Now they rebuilt McLaren. They tore it to the ground finally after multiple years and years and years of grand jury people going out, grand juries going out and saying, look, you need to do something about this place. This place is a disaster. It's crumbling. You need to do something, and being ignored both by the citizens of Los Angeles when it got on the ballot for funding, citizens rejected it, and then by the Board of Supervisors. They finally caved in, and they did do that, and they razed it to the ground. And what they did is they erected a big wall. They put up you can go out there today, it's still there. They put up, I don't know, it's a 15-foot wall, and they may have called them cottages. In my mind, what looked like, honestly, concrete bunkers. Those are not cottages. And that continued until it was closed in 2003. And the reason I bring that up is it never let go. And this is a problem with facilities like this generally. It never let go of its history of violence, of its history of having kids dumped there, and having kids who had the greatest needs being put in the very worst place. So that was the place that you went when there was literally no other place that the Department of Children and Family Services could, or frankly, in some cases, felt like putting you.
So I know that there were these efforts, I guess. I don't know, in my mind, as soon as I saw Nancy Daly Reardon's name, I said, oh, okay, well, these are some bored housewives that, they had some money and, came to volunteer their time at McLaren Hall. But she was, I guess, pivotal in establishing a Department of Children and Family Services. But did it really help anything?
So, I knew Nancy very well.
Okay.
And Nancy actually worked very hard. Nancy was a doer. Nancy, I've said from the outset, I miss Nancy. Nancy Daly died of pancreatic cancer a few years back. But when I sat down with Nancy, Nancy did her homework. Nancy spent hours at McLaren. She spent hours, having meetings with the Department of Children and Family Services. This was, quite frankly, you kind of allude to this. This was not something that Nancy Daly needed to do. Right. Nancy was Nancy was twice, exactly. Nancy was a very well-off woman. She did not need to be doing that. She could have been going to Idaho and skiing and flying around in jets and all that sort of business. She did not need to be walking around, meeting with bureaucrats who didn't really care and weren't going to do anything, and trying to convince them and pound their heads against the wall to do something. So, that said, I think the problem around McLaren is, frankly, it was just unfixable. And we know that now. We know that we knew that from the beginning. I mean, how that place operated from 1960 until 2003. How long do you need? Right. How many kids do you have to, just basic common decency. When you look at a place like that, isn't there some little voice in your head that says, maybe it's not maybe it's not the right thing to do to lock a child up behind a wall that's guarded by security guards, that we fundamentally have no control. Maybe that's not a good thing. But apart from just that basic feeling that when you went there is no way that you would want any one of your children, any child that you loved or knew there. But apart from that, we knew it from frankly social work practice and child welfare practice. There were other facilities like this across the country. Not all of them were that big. McLaren was unusually large. Yeah. But the results were the same. They ended up being huge, chaotic dumping grounds. And they just don't work. And we know they don't work. And so
even now, I'm hearing from social workers who are still in the field that there is still a need for some type of facility. And what they're doing with kids now is putting them in Airbnbs. Yeah. In hotels downtown. Yeah. So now McLaren Hall is gone, but then what is the replacement?
Yeah, and I do hear that a lot. And I gotta say that's an argument that you're, and it's real tempting. You say we got all these kids, and they need places, and where do you want us to put them? A social worker, a placement worker would very likely come up and say that. Many of them would, not all, but many. And I guess my first response is, why have these kids been placed in foster care to begin with?
Right.
And are we taking too many kids into foster care? And what kids are we taking into foster care compared to other kids? And the answer to that is, one, we know we're taking in too many kids into foster care because we know that the majority of kids are taken in foster care, not because of abuse, not because a parent doesn't love a child, not because a parent has ever laid a finger on that child, but because that parent is poor, because they come from what we call a dirty home, because the fridge is empty, because mom can't afford childcare when she goes out and is looking for a job or has a job.
Right.
And then we can break it down into the issues of, take a look at the kids that we are taking, the actual kids. And then you come into issues like disproportionality.
Yeah. And
you see that we overwhelmingly take African-American babies away from their moms than we do white babies.
And that's what's going to be my next question. What do you think the percentage is of Black families who are broken up versus white families?
Oh, it's multiples. It's multiples disproportionately. And we know this. I mean, one of the things I'll say that I'm very proud of, if I could just brag for one thing, it wasn't an issue. Of course it was an issue. It wasn't talked about. In 1999, Los Angeles County decided to appoint a blue ribbon task force to investigate safety within its foster care system. And I was lucky, I suppose, to be selected as chair of that task force. And we were one of the first, and this was not, I'm not going to claim credit for this, but our group was one of the very first to come out and say, Los Angeles, you need to take a look at the disproportionate taking of African-American babies away from their mothers. Because if you look at it, you are taking far, far too many. And we just know it from the numbers. Unless you're willing to accept things that are absolutely appalling, like Black people abuse their children more than white people, which has completely been disregarded and completely is an absurdity. It's probably just racism, raw racism. What you're doing is you're taking away those kids because those kids and those families don't have a lot of the resources and advantages, frankly, that come with being white.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is pure racism. Another reason is you can look at things about how often doctors report that the newborn infant has been drug exposed. And what babies, so doc, what babies are you more likely to call the foster care department about, and what babies are you not? And you look at that, and doctors disproportionately report African-American and Latino babies, report their parents as compared to Caucasian or white babies. So those are the sorts of things that are intolerable. And if we began to tackle those problems, to go to your very original question, you'd see that we have fewer kids in care. We're taking fewer kids in care, and we need to do that because we know the system doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. And so if you began to do that, you need to. Now, that said, there are things that you can do as well. There are things like emergency foster homes. Those are foster homes that are there on call. I have actually supervised these homes, and I was actually, my first foster care placement was an emergency foster care home. Now, I spent time at McLaren, first of all, but then they moved me into an emergency licensed home. And we need to actively recruit those foster parents. And we can do that. Departments just do a really poor job at it, and frankly, get a little lazy at it. So the first thing is those kinds of homes. The second thing is to take a look at actually supporting families. So instead of taking their kids, saying, how can we help you? And if frankly, if you don't care about kids and you don't care about these families, and you all you care about is money, look at the money.
And see, that was my another question. Where did the money go? Was there money to better care for the children placed in foster care or in McLaren Hall specifically? Because from my understanding, when you're a foster parent, you are subsidized.
Yes, you are.
And that's why you have so many foster parents, or had at one point, who were just in it for the money, and they would have as many children as they could, and they would keep a lot of the money to themselves and not care for the child. So when the social worker showed up, then, oh, the child has all these toys all of a sudden and all these nice clothes, but as soon as the social worker leaves, all that stuff goes into a box. Or the foster family has their own biological children that they treat better and give more care to than the foster children. So I'm wondering, money-wise, you know, what were their funds allocated for the needs of children in McLaren Hall or in other facilities? Because I know you spent time in Alabama as well. What was their funding? And if so, was it misappropriated?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a really, really important one to understand foster parents, understand their motivations, first of all. So one of the things is that issue of foster parents making money off of kids is actually, it's actually a hard thing to do, because they get so little money for their children that they take. It's nowhere near how much, unless you begin to do things like have families that are taking 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children. And that's why, you know, for example, something that I've worked on is to literally just cap the number of foster children that one foster care family can take. No more than 6 is frankly the number that has come up, because you cannot, if nothing else, you cannot care for that many kids that have the kinds of support that they're going to need, because they've been taken from their mom and dad.
Yeah,
they're going to need a lot of support. But the other thing that's been a real problem is, if you look at the way foster care departments have been funded, and they've been funded by the federal government, and this shows how damaging money can be if you put it in the wrong places. And so what it comes down to in foster care is, you look at a foster care department, the way it was traditionally funded, it was 2 things. It was very simple. You compensated local foster care departments for, 1, how many kids did you take from their parents? So you had to take a kid from a parent, you can get money. 2, how long are you going to keep that money? How long is that money keep flowing into your coffers? Not only pay for your foster parents, but also to pay for all your administrative expenses, to go ahead and pay for your department, pay for all those salaries and these massive bureaucracies that sit on top of the system. The only way that money is going to keep flowing in is if you continue to keep that kid in care. So just to go through it again. So it meant that you had a system that said, we're going to pay you for the number of kids you take and how long you keep them. I can't think of a worse set of incentives.
Yeah.
And so it means you end up taking kids that don't need to be taken, and you keep them longer than they don't need to be kept. And when you started up this conversation, and I have to say it is a huge soft spot in my heart, obviously because of my own mom, but also because of the moms that I've worked with, is and dads. But you don't have money, or there hasn't been money to go ahead and help that mom. And they're overwhelmingly, they are moms. They're young moms. To go ahead and get that mom the help that she needs. There's no debate that those moms, by the way, love their kids. We know that. They desperately love those kids. I've sat down with moms who've had, 1, 2, several children taken away. And there is no doubt in my heart, you look in their eyes, listen to them, the sorrow that they feel. We don't really talk about that enough. I'll be honest with you. We don't talk about what it means to a woman to have her child taken, and what that would mean for the rest of her life. And I can't imagine, but I can guess that sorrow and that loss and that sense of shame doesn't ever go away.
Yeah. One of my first jobs out of college was, well, actually in college, I worked in a summer program. And then when I graduated undergrad, was at Drew Child Development, Charles Drew.
Yeah, no.
And they had a family preservation program. So that was trying to reunify children with their parents.
Yes.
And all moms. And so there were programs where they would try to help the mom with parenting classes. We have partnered with, I want to say, was it Southwest? I think it was Southwest College. So some of the teachers there would teach child development courses. They had some therapy sessions. They had their visitation at the facility because they had to have supervised visitation in some cases. So they're trying to help them to reunify and do whatever they needed to do to get their children back from the foster family. And I think around Clinton era, when he said, okay, if you're getting public assistance, you need to be learning a skill or a trade or something like that to keep your assistance going. And around that time, a lot of one-stop shops started popping up where, oh, you can come here and learn this, and the funding started, getting kind of funny. And that program, the education piece of Drew Child Development, was no longer funded. So that went, the jobs and the program and the whole thing. And I don't know what happened with those families after that, like where they went after that program ended.
And those programs have always been an afterthought in child welfare systems. We talk about them, and I've worked for departments, I've sued departments, I've worked with departments, and they're very happy to talk about them. But when you go ahead and you sit down and you start talking to the folks that are supposed to help, you go out and you start talking to some moms and say, what did that program do for you? Did that program listen to you? Do you think that program understood you? Did that program meet you where you were? Were you able to get into a program? Right. And overwhelming, I'm sorry, it hurts me to say this, but the answer is going to be no. And that's because it's not given the attention, and it's also it's hard work. I mean, I imagine you know that. Yeah. It's hard work. It's hard to help someone. It's hard to help someone in a way that isn't canned. It's just not, oh, I'm going to get down my checklist and there we go. It's very, very hard work, but this is worth it. Because we got that mom and say, where's not that child? And you want to get that child back with that mom or that dad or back with their family as soon, as quick as is possible, so that they're going to be safe. Right.
Now, tell me about the right for the 60,000 foster children to speak about their treatment and care. Because as I'm looking online and seeing survivor groups of McLaren, a lot of them are saying, where are my records? Yeah. I don't know where anything is. It's like they're ghosts. Yeah. And even people that I know who worked at McLaren Hall, their personnel records, they don't know where they are. So how did that come about that you had to, as an attorney, fight for the right of these children to just speak about their experience?
Yeah, so what that was a court order, a blanket court order that flatly forbid not just kids, but their parents, for any relative, anyone, from publicly talking about what their experience was like in foster care. Just a blanket order across the board. And, I can say as a lawyer, I'm sorry, that is flat out unconstitutional. It's called the First Amendment. And sure, you may be able to go ahead and say, in this instance, because of these special circumstances, we're going to restrict that right to talk to the press. And we all know this from trials and things like that we see out there, that the judges do that. But when we see them do that, we go, oh, that's different. There's something involved here that the judges decided that this is required in this instance. We don't do it for everybody. And so you have to ask, well, who's that serving? Is that serving the kids? Is that serving the parents? No. And ultimately, it's not even serving the system, because the system's not listening to the people it's supposed to care for. And that's the biggest thing that says to me. That says, you be quiet. We're not interested. We have what we do. We're going to do what we do, and you're going to take what we do. And it's a tough way to put it, but that's what happens.
That's what it is, yeah.
And with regard to, the records, I have to say, I know that frustration because I happen to be one of those people. My records were destroyed. And there are different accounts for it, that there was a big flood down at the old, courthouse downtown, and it destroyed a bunch of records. I don't know the reason why, but I know the effect. I know that what that means, because I get notes from people, I get emails, things appear on Facebook, all sorts of things like that. Folks asking, my childhood, literally disappeared.
Right.
I was removed from my parents when I was 9, and I was in care until I was 15. And I don't have a thing. I don't know anything about what's going on with my mom and dad. I don't have a single photograph. I don't have any of those things that anyone else has, that they look back at, and we all know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
We all know. I mean, I'll tell you honestly, I don't have a single picture of my mom. I had one picture of my mom, and my foster parents destroyed all the other photographs.
What was that about?
Mean, just plain mean. Yeah, it's just, I don't know why else you'd do that. Just plain mean. I had one picture of her and me sitting on the bedroom in my foster parents' house, and the idiot that I am, I lost that. And I'll tell you, to this day, I don't know that there's anything else that I've lost that I want more.
Man, and your grandmother didn't have any photos?
No, my grandma lived in Chicago. I was in LA. No. So, but so what I can say about it, those records, they're not well kept.
Yeah,
they're really precious. I mean, if you look to someone who doesn't know a thing about foster care and say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take your parents' phone or their photo albums or whatever's on their walls, and I'm going to take everything down and throw it away. How are you going to feel? Where's that going to leave you?
right.
I know you're 45 years old. You're nowhere near being a kid anymore, but that's going to leave a hole in you. And so we ought to be careful. We ought to exercise care. We're done.
And speaking of the book, because I didn't even go through your whole bio before we started talking, we just started talking. But your book, Hope's Boy, which is a memoir, New York Times, Publishers Weekly, and LA Times bestseller. It was definitely an incredible read, or listen in my case, because I got the audio book, but it was so descriptive. Great writer. You are a great writer. But I mean, Harvard Law graduate, awarded Fulbright Fellowship, writing resident. So that makes sense because you're a great writer.
Thank you.
And began your legal career representing children in facilities across Alabama. I'm wondering how you got to Alabama from California, Southern California.
Yeah. Well, I started out, after I graduated from law school, I started out and I did, it wasn't my heart, but it was the traditional thing to do. And it was the thing that you did. And that was, I got myself a job at a big law firm in Los Angeles. And they were very nice to me. They were actually, which is kind of an unusual thing for, the life of an associate at a big law firm is generally not a great one. And it's not something you'd find most associates saying, oh, my bosses, my partners, that they're nice to me. So it was unusual. It was a good experience. The problem was I was bored to tears. I didn't have I didn't have a connection to what I was doing. And that was fine for a lot of people. I mean, I would talk to people and say, do you really care about this? Do you care about this proxy statement that we're drafting? I mean, other than, if you make a mistake, you're going to get in trouble. You care about that. Right. But do you care about anything else? And for a lot of folks, that's okay because, they're making a good living. They're comfortable. It has a lot of status to it. There's a lot of perks to that. And in my case, it might have had to do with the way I grew up, not having a lot of money. Money was not a huge motivator for me. I never wanted to, the idea of, you know, being rich, you know, and having all those things, just, it never touched my soul. And that was really important to me. And so after a bit, called up the law school that I went to and said, you know, I'm okay here, it's fine. But I'd like to do something that has to do with kids and something that's more meaningful. And so there was a very big lawsuit, it's a class action lawsuit in Alabama, that involved every person, so every adult, every child, every elder or senior who was in a psychiatric institution or a mental retardation facility. And I was responsible for the kids part of that. So all the kids who were in that system. And it was really focused on their fundamental rights to have meaningful care in those facilities for their mental health needs, to be able to see their parents, to be able to be discharged from them as quickly as they could be, and to be safe. And so that's what I did.
Wow.
Enjoyed it.
And then the girls' school.
Yes, New Village.
New Village. Now, is New Village, do you see, again, as we talked about, a lot more African-American young women at New Village, or is it pretty diverse?
I think you do see that. You do see. I've never counted, to be honest, but just kind of anecdotally walking. Yeah, you certainly do see more young women, and they're girls, they're children, of color. You know, there. I suppose it's. I think it's a great place. It was the first all-girls charter school for pregnant and parenting teens. And the thing that was so important about it, and it was you know, it was me and a really good guy named Andy Bogan who I'd worked with. One of the main points of it was, if you looked at how well these girls, these young women were doing in schools, in traditional public schools, it was just a massive failure. And if they were going to a traditional public school, it was a massive failure. If they were going to a county school, which is a special kind of school, it was a massive, they were just completely underperforming. And so again, it goes back to that issue. It's either the system or the kid, and I refuse to believe that it's the kid. And so what this allowed with a charter school, allowed a lot of flexibility. So that meant, for example, things like expulsion.
Yeah.
You know, expulsion is, you know, disproportionately used against kids of color. And it is a rough and very often a really, really bad tool. I mean, just again, it's just common sense.
Well, you talk about that too in your book, where there was, I think, was it a family of 3 boys or 4 boys that one got into a fight at the school, but, you know, the white kid got suspended and then the suspension revoked, but then the other boys, you never saw them again.
Yeah.
So that kind of speaks to that too.
That's exactly right. So that goes into, you know, your kid gets expelled, your kid gets suspended, and the parent shows up at, you know, the principal's office, or the vice principal, who's ever responsible for making that decision, and who walks into that office with more entitlement? Yeah, we don't even know the answer to that. But then also to go to the basic point of being reasonably, offering a good education to someone. Do you really want to go ahead and look at a child who's struggling, where school is not an affirming, you know, situation for that child? That, you know, that child is not getting lots of attaboys and attagirls and, oh, there you go, and you can do this, and oh, wonder. That's not coming that kid's way. So that's not coming that kid's way. So then what you're going to do is you're going to say, you know what, we're going to throw you out. I can't think of anything worse. How is that supposed to help the kid's education?
Yeah.
The kid that's most in need, you're going to say, okay, I'm sorry, we're going to expel you. We're going to suspend you. And so to go back to the New Village, it's because the folks on the board would kill me, and the girls would kill me. I didn't say it. What it allowed a lot more flexibility with that. So there were no automatic suspensions or expulsions.
Okay.
It allowed curriculum to be developed that was meaningful to kids, and the kids could understand. And I mean understand in a way that it meant something to them, that they connected with it. And so that's why I think New Village is pretty cool.
And then, not that you weren't busy enough, but you went on to lead California's largest recruiter of LGBTQ plus foster and adoptive parents. So what led you or compelled you to help with the recruitment of LGBTQ plus parents for adoption? I think one of the things is you can simply take a look at some of the studies with this, and that is that gay, lesbian, bisexual parents and other folks overwhelmingly make excellent foster parents. They are among the most reliable. They are among the most flexible. The record in adoptions is one where there are the least ruptures. What that rupture means when someone adopts a child out of foster care and then goes ahead and does that, frankly, in my mind, what is the worst possible thing you could do? And that is you say, you know what, I changed my mind. I don't want this kid anymore. It's called a rupture. Imagine anything more brutal. You're better off never having adopted that child in the first place, obviously. Right.
But if you look at the record for those families, they do really well. They do exceptionally well. They make wonderful foster parents. They make caring foster parents. And so it was a group of in my mind, having the honor of working with people who so much wanted to be parents and cared so deeply for the kids that were placed with them. I'm not saying they're all perfect. No, there were some folks where this isn't going to work. But overwhelmingly, these were folks that made among the best foster parents we had.
Now, did you wind up having any children, Andrew?
No, my partner has two boys. I give a shout out to Bradford and Kyle.
So you're a bonus dad.
Yeah. So two boys, and one's just graduating from. I'm getting selfish here now. plays the bass, and he's just graduating from Berkeley School back in Boston, and the other is going to NAU, Northern Arizona. And so they're wonderful kids. And as I tell my partner, what you did best is it's not about grades. They get good grades, but it's not about grades. It's not about awards. It's about did you create a human being that by the time when that child left you, that child had empathy for other people. That's your job as a parent. And those two boys have, you can get me crying here if you see. They've got a lot of empathy. They are truly empathetic people, and they truly care, and they know they're fortunate, and they're aware of that. So there we go. Yay, I did it.
So I was going to ask too, how many current lawsuits exist in LA County I saw, I think Herman Miller Law Group has one where the statute of limitations ends this year, December, for survivors of MacLaren Hall. And when we talk about lawsuits against the county or DCFS or McLaren specifically, what do the litigants gain from the lawsuit?
You know, I pause because I don't know what they gain, but I admire their courage. You know, I don't know if they're going to get a financial, you know, judgment in their favor. And for me, that's so secondary. It's like a third, fourth, it's so far down there. But as I recall, these are two women that I know of. The courage to stand up and to say, this happened to me. And this happened to me, and then it opens up a whole thing. This happened to me, and my family was struggling. This happened to me at the hands of strangers in a facility where I was put, where I was supposed to be safer than any place else. And, you know, my family never knew about this probably. My significant other, husband, wife, girlfriend, best friend, not know about this. And I am now, not only I'm going to do that, but I'm going to step up and I'm going to, you got to think of what they're going up against.
Yeah.
LA County is not, you may think of, folks may think a lot about LA County. I have my own opinions about LA County. But I'll tell you one thing LA County is not lacking in when it needs it is money and resources. Yeah. And they will throw those at that case and at those plaintiffs, at those two that have stood up with everything they can. And that's a lot of power and that's a lot of money. I mean, I used to talk about when you litigate, when you stand up in court against the county of Los Angeles or against any county, they will always have more information. They will always have more resources. They will always have more money. And the thing is, unlike us, LA County is never going to die. Right. It's immortal. It just keeps going. Well, I'm so sad as it may be, we're all on a timeline. Mm-hmm. Like that old joke, none of us gets out of here alive. I mean, we have our lives, we have our commitments. That doesn't exist for a massive county bureaucracy. So, you know, I admire those folks, and you know, I haven't looked at their individual cases, but what I've heard of it, it certainly doesn't surprise me, and it certainly sounds like something that is very credible. I don't know in their individual circumstances. I'd have to talk to them, but I don't know why you'd ever do that unless you believed and you knew, you know. So.
Well, I mean, you know, that's kind of like with all of the allegations of sexual assault by celebrities and well-known people. It's kind of like, well, why are they saying anything now? Or what are they going to gain from this? Or, you know, so on and so forth. But there has been legislation that has come out of some of these cases. So, you know, that is something to gain, you know, too. Well,
and like I say that, you know, so you know, when you meet to someone,
mm-hmm.
you can meet to Harvey Weinstein, you can point at one guy, and point at that nasty dude and say, you, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, pointing you at the screen right now, but you can have someone to point at and mm-hmm. say, you did this to me. These women, they don't really have anyone to point at other than a county. They don't even, very likely, I'm sure they don't know the names of their actual victimizers. And that takes a lot more courage. I mean, it's arguing against a wall. And so, you know, I'm glad you brought it up because they need that. They deserve it.
Yeah. And then some, I guess in some instances, they could possibly name some of the staff that they were abused by. But if there are other kids, it's kind of where, okay, well, you put me in a harmful situation.
Yeah.
You know, and you neglected me under this guise of caring for or transporting from one facility to a foster home or whatever those things are. You did not do what you were supposed to do in making sure that I was safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that is like that argument that can you prove it? Who do you have? I mean, especially when you're a child. Yep. And I always say it seems like we keep seeing instances of this country specifically not caring enough about women and children.
Absolutely.
We are not protected.
Absolutely. That's
don't be Black on top of it.
I am so glad to hear you say no. The app. No, this is one of the things that has always bothered in LA County. I'm so glad to hear you say this because there's a commission that LA County has that's supposed to oversee the foster care system. It's called the Commission on Children and Families. Right. Last I checked, there has never once been a mom or a dad who's had their child removed put on that commission. That commission that's supposed to oversee the department, advise the department, tell them whether they're doing a good job. They have never, ever done that. What's that about?
Yeah, that makes no sense. Like they would know more so than anyone else.
It's just, and also it just comes down to just basic competence. Don't you? Do you want to know what you're doing or don't you?
Right.
And when you look at that, you got to shake your head and say, well, maybe not so much. Maybe not.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
my electrician, who has got to be, if he's not 70, he's close. Mm-hmm. And he and his sister were removed from their single mom. She was working. They had food. They were clothed. They had, I think, neighbors looking in on them because she could not afford childcare, but she had been on public assistance and removed herself once she got a job because she knew if she continued to accept the checks, mm-hmm. then that would be a criminal activity back in whatever year this was. Mm-hmm. And so for whatever reason, the county kept sending the money. She wasn't cashing the checks. So I guess law enforcement or whoever mm-hmm. Was responsible for checking in. I don't know if somebody called on, or if they said, okay, well, we're sending her this check and she's not cashing it. Let's see what's going on. Went into the home. Mom wasn't there. Kids were there.
Yeah.
Oh, they gotta go. There's no adult supervision, blah, blah, blah. And he and his sister wound up in foster care for a year or so until his mother could do whatever she could do to get them back. But they were mistreated at McLaren. They were mistreated in their foster home. That scenario I gave about the foster family keeping them in dirty clothes, holes in them until the social worker came. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Then they put on the, the nice clothes and what have you. And I've heard several adults now who were in foster care say that they, as adults, went back and confronted their foster family.
Well, there's a bit of that in my book.
He was one of those people.
And I can say just for personal experience, there was when one of the dozens of social, because I was in care from 6 to 18, I can remember 2 or 3 names, of social workers. But yeah, you bet. When on the rare occasions that social worker came to the house, because they stop and we actually work to make it mandatory that social workers go out to these homes and, as they say in Alabama, they lay eyes on that kid. But, my case, for example, was there a little bit of performing up going on? Did suddenly, just behavior, was I not yelled at or did they, did my foster mother neglect to mention, that she had a habit of keeping me in my room for days and weeks at a time when I was forbidden to leave? Did she mention that she would regularly, call my mom a nut because she had paranoid schizophrenia? Did she talk about the fact that she would, grab her own children by the face and do things that, we saw someone do that at a grocery store? I mean, you march up and say, what do you think you're doing? Did that get brought up? No. And was I going to bring that up? No. And it was very simple. It was, I knew what would happen.
Yeah.
I saw what other kids that were honest, that, made a fuss, said anything, they were gone. And they either went back to McLaren, which my foster mother regularly threatened to send me back to, or they were just gone. And I knew that no matter how bad it was, I had to stay put.
The survival mode.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You just stay put. Now there were times when, the teenager and the boy who was going to defend his mom got a little mouthy with him, pretty mild stuff, but I knew when that social worker came, I sat and I smiled, and I just, didn't talk about the absence of food, didn't talk about, being woken up in the middle of the night and told to pack my bags, and this game of, well, you can go to school, but the social worker will be here in the afternoon to get you up, and ride my bike home from Christopher Columbus Junior High School looking for that.
You were riding that bike everywhere.
My bike, well, let me out. Let me out. And by the way, back then, foster children weren't allowed to have driver's licenses, but which is probably a good thing, I'll say, given the way I drive occasionally. But in any event, yeah, in that way, I smartened up. Not because I was particularly smart, but because I just saw what was happening to kids around, the other kids. That car would show up. Their bags would be, their things, wherever they had, be stuffed in a garbage bag, and they were gone. Never heard from them again.
Yeah, you mentioned the garbage bag. That just reminds me another thing about Tiffany Haddish is, I think part of what she does to advocate for foster children is she provides them with suitcases.
Yeah.
Because she remembers those trash bags.
Yeah, yeah.
And feeling like she was trash.
Yes.
They would just throw all her stuff, in these bags.
Yeah.
And so just the effect, the trauma, PTSD, that these kids, now adults, are still experiencing, is a real thing.
Well, these are kids, these are children. I say sometimes is, well, let's do it to you. You're grown up. You're 35 years old. You know what we're going to do? We're going to show up at your house unexpected. We're going to come into your house uninvited. And we're going to tell you, grab what you can, if we'll let you. And then we're going to take you to someplace. We're not going to tell where you're going to take you. We're just going to take you. And we're going to put you there. And we'll let you go when we let you go. The kind of trauma that does. Last I heard that's pretty much an abduction, and that's what it feels like to a child. That's what it would feel like to an adult.
And you, in your case, 6 years old, you don't know where you're going, where you are when you get there. There's these adults talking to you as if you're a criminal.
Absolutely.
And you're 6 years old.
I will tell you, I've never forgotten, arriving at McLaren. It's this big hulking place, creepy as all get. Just scary. The big gate, there's an electronic gate, it buzzes open. I get in there, and it's this enormous hall. I still remember it, still remember the plaque. The plaques are still there, actually. Yeah. But remember it, and I remember very clearly And if you talk to people who undergo trauma at a young age, they remember it because it's a self-protective mechanism. If you're going to survive, you better be paying attention to everything that's going around you. It's called hypervigilance. It's very common. But I remember, I just turned 6, and looking at that social work, this woman I didn't even know. I just knew that she yanked me from my mom on a street in North Hollywood, and I remember begging her not to leave me. I didn't know who she was. Please don't leave me here. She did. Yeah. And there I was. Months. Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, this is why this is just like so incredible to me that kids survive this type of trauma. I mean, of course, you relive it from time to time, but you survive. You, Andrew Bridge, have thrived and have gone back and helped other kids, still helping other kids, advocating for them. What are you doing like currently, as I know you're in Arizona. So what do you do these days with yourself?
Well, well, we're all now allowed to leave our house, which is, we don't do this all the time now. Though I hope I can meet you in person sometime. I just finished the manuscript of my second book.
Oh, good.
Which is about those children that I represented in Alabama, and what it meant to go back to a facility and represent kids in a facility that was really just a parallel, just so much like the facility that I had survived as a kid. And in some ways that meant that I had a better understanding of the kids. I think I could talk to them in a way that I think got it a little better. But also at times it meant that I was pretty uncomfortable. It was a little
triggering.
Yeah. You go and you think, well, I'm going to be great at this because I've been through this. I'm going to know it. And then you can find that, I'm not as great. I'm not as comfortable with this. I'm not happy, when they have the same electronic fences and everything. And, when that electronic fence, and slammed shut, there's a little chill that went down my spine. And, when I went into their seclusion rooms, and I remember those places, it wasn't just, walking into a room. And I will say to this day, I still have terrible claustrophobia.
Wow, okay.
Just cannot, please do not get me in an elevator with that door.
I was about to say elevator.
Oh, if it's, the basic rule is less than three flights, I'm up the stairs. No, I'm happy to take the stairs. It all, I know where it comes from. It comes from being locked in a basement inside McLaren Hall. Right after I got there, because I wouldn't take a shower I was a shy, scared kid, and I was afraid to strip down and take a shower with 100 other naked kids, and I didn't know what to do, and I missed my mom. It was the first day that I got there, and I just, I didn't do it. And so
I'm trying to break your spirit.
Well, it worked. I mean, they put me in that basement, and they got what they wanted. After that, I took those showers.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how can people find your book? What's going on with you? So if you want to reach out.
The book is always, it's on Amazon. I suppose we have a few independent booksellers, and I used to be real careful about mentioning Amazon because, you got these mom and pop bookstores that are trying to make it. But you can't find it there. You can't find it on Amazon. It's up in there, and I'm fortunate that I most rewarding thing is I hear from folks. I hear from people like yourself, and it's a real honor, and it means a lot. So
Well, I'm going to put this out in the universe because I really see my background. My undergrad is radio, TV, film production. And when you're creative in your mind, you're always trying to think of ways to be creative, which is now I have this podcast because I work in healthcare finance. So completely different worlds. You know, I have a regular job, a 9-to-5 job, but I really see MacLaren Hall or some type of manuscript story in film.
Yeah.
You know, a real film, not like a little piece here or kind of, I think the show Bosch, there was a series, he was a detective or something, and he had like a background. So I'm not thinking like a fiction, I mean, real true documentary style from 1960 all the way to 2003.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, I mean, that's a big part of the manuscript that I wrote, to be honest with you. I spent a lot of time, you know, researching it, and it's hard research to find the history of that place. But given just the size of it, I mean, it is enormous. And the thousands of kids that went through that place.
Yeah. Every year, it's like 5,000, 6,000 kids.
It was just the number of people's lives that that place affected is just, it deserves something.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to say something. I've never said this publicly before. One thing that it deserves to be recognized.
Yeah.
Is the kind of what you're talking about. And I'm going to say it right now. It deserves an apology from the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. They need to stand up and recognize. I know that they were not personally responsible, but the county that they oversee and they govern was, and they need to recognize that, and they need to apologize. They need to stand up and have the courage to forget about liability, forget about, you know, what county council is telling them. They need to do the right thing, the moral thing, and the thing that they know in their hearts. You know, and that starts with the Board of Supervisors that were responsible for overseeing it. And I could call out some specific names, but those people, those supervisors know who they were. They knew what was going on there. They knew. I went to McLaren with them. You know, I could see it in their eyes. They knew they would never have one of their own children there ever. And it was fine though to have other people's children there.
Well, unfortunately, sometimes you have to shame people into doing the right thing. And, you know, that's where all the video cameras.
Yeah, there we go. Carrying them.
Exactly. So it may take, you know, a 6-part documentary series in order to get the accountability and the apology. But I see it. I see it. And because I'm telling you, every time I read a memoir or see a documentary, it comes up. And I hope that the survivors continue to speak out and tell their stories. I know some just kind of want to keep it among survivors and not publicly share certain things that have gone on, specifically at McLaren or just in LA County foster care system. But if anyone is watching this and wants to speak out, I just encourage you to do so. And let your voice be heard so that you can help someone else and yourself to try to heal from that trauma. But Andrew, I'm not going to keep you any longer. Thank you so much for being so responsive, because I reached out to a few people, but you're the only one. Oh. And I mean, quick too. You were the only one.
I thank you. I really do. Thank you.
You are welcome. But we're going to be on the Oscar stage. Watch. I'm putting it out there. Here we go. Emmy, Oscar, Golden Globe.
Tony, we'll make a play. Okay.
It's going to happen. Mark my words. I'm putting it on my vision. Actually, it's on my vision board.
Is it? Yeah. Oh.
I have McLaren Hall on a Post-it.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
So it's going to happen. But I hope to make this a series. I do know some social workers. One actually has a property in my community, and she worked at McLaren Hall in the 90s.
Oh, interesting.
So I want to talk to her, and hopefully I can get some other survivors. There's a popular DJ here that was in McLaren Hall as well. He agreed to speak to me, but then I haven't heard back from him. So, but you know, LA people are flaky. I can't do it. I mean, this is a Midwest thing, right? You know, you're on it. You're honest. You do what you say you're gonna do. LA, you know. I say people in LA, a yes is a maybe and a maybe is a no.
That's about it. That's about it. Mm-hmm. But it'll always be said with a smile.
Oh yeah. I'm blunt because I just say what I mean what I say, and people cannot. They can't take it.
It's a nice call. It's important.
Yeah, they can't take it. But thank you so much. I'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day. Say hi to your dog.
I will. You have an awesome weekend. Thank you so much for this. Keep at it, please.
I will. And I might have to circle back to you. So
I'm good with that. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.